Did you pay your full tithing?
He says, I can make a whole entire video about how the church grew so much money. Yeah, Johnny, that's what we signed up for here. Your video is titled, How the Mormon Church Made $293 billion.
I'm not talking about the church's investment strategies with my teenagers. No.
You are losing a buttload of money on all these people because you don't have any collateral. There's nothing there.
And now it's time to consider the path of your feet. For crying out loud.
Welcome back to Salty Saints. My name is Hayden Holm, and today I am joined by none other than Roy Anderson from the Iron Rodcast. We got Jeff Borders, the author of the Antichrist Playbook, and today we are tackling part 2 of the Johnny Harris 8-cow debunking. And to recap, be sure to go check out the part 1 that we did with Johnny Harris, broke into his claims of the harm that the church caused. And the harm we discovered turned out to be that life was too good. Things were too happy at home. Life was too stable. The sun was shining too brightly. His mother smiled too widely. His home life was just too great, and it caused him harm that he is now expressing with dramatic piano music in the background as he looks sadly wearing his Joseph Smith shirt. That's part 1. That's the TLDR version. Part 2, we're getting into church finances. And so right now, basically, he's looking at the church saying, Mohana, you ugly. And we are saying, no, the church is actually an 8-cow institution. So we are going to watch what he has to say about church finances, and then we'll get your reaction.
How long has he been making videos?
He's been making them for a really long time because he's got videos of him as a child. He's got videos of him as a teenager. Basically, he's got more videos than my dad ever looked at me, okay? So he's got this entire collection of videos. And yeah. Anyway, so let me share my screen. We'll get cracking on this.
So let's talk about money now, because you now have a picture of what it's like to be in the Mormon church, the devotion and the sense of loyalty that you experience, the sense of belonging. And you now have a sense of to go in the temple, which you need to do to be sealed to your family and to go to heaven, the top part of heaven, you have to pay 10% of your income. And at the end of the year, you do this thing called tithing settlement, where you go to that same office, to that same bishop, and he gives you a piece of paper that's like, here's all the tithing you said you paid. Is it a full tithe? Have you actually paid your full tithing? And you say, you look the guy in the eye and you're like, yes, I did. And you sign it. And you tithing is so important. What are they doing with the money is the question. And the answer is, well, they're a church. They're probably building the church and they're probably doing humanitarian work. The Mormons are always doing humanitarian work.
I'm sorry, Roy, did you say something? It looks like you're muted.
Oh, no, it was the whole bishop. I just cannot picture a bishop sliding over your tithing settlement, little tap on it. So are you a full tithe payer? Like with the finger in the face? I just have never had that experience. Maybe some people have. Maybe people have had that experience. But I've never, my bishop, anytime I've had a bishop in a tithing settlement, talk to me. It's always, how can I help you? What more can I do for you? Are you a full tithe payer? I say yes, because I am. And then he goes, now what can I do for you? What can we as a ward do to help you and your family? And I've always had really good experiences with my bishops and tithing settlements. I don't really know. I just don't know the whole pointing. I mean,
that's a great question. We've all been members of the church about as long as Johnny, if not more. I think we could all kind of give some pretty good experience to bear on this situation. My experience with tithing settlement is the bishop has overbooked his schedule like nobody's business. He's just running and scrambling to and from places. He's going. And so by the time he actually sits down in front of you, he just got done ministering to some person over here, or giving somebody a blessing or consoling somebody. And so he slams the door. He's getting into the office. He's just like, how are you? You know, and you can just see how overwhelmed he is and how much he's got on his shoulders. Honestly, more times than not, when I sit down, I'm like, how are you, Bishop? How are you holding up? Oh, I'm good. I'm all right. And then usually he pulls out my tithing papers. He doesn't even look at them. He just hands them over to me. And then he says, are you a full tithe payer? And I say yes, or I say no. And either way, he says, okay, all right, well, we sure do love having you in the ward. And how can I help your family? How can we keep helping you guys? And there's no pressure. Like, Johnny, did you see the pressure that you said bishops have? He's like, a bishop will sit you down and he will pull out the shame bus on you, and he's just going to run you right over with the shame. He's like, hey, did you pay your full tithing? It has never been that heated. I've never seen that amount of pea and vinegar from a bishop, because honestly, a bishop has to take care of the entire ward. Tithing declaration has to happen before the end of the year. So usually December, most bishops, if they're behind, which I've known a couple of bishops that have been behind in December, they're just scrambling. They're not going to sit there and try and figure out the nitty gritty of your tithing. Oh, this month you paid this much, and then this month you paid this. Are you a full tithe payer? Because you told me yes, but this seems to differ from what you said. They don't have time for that. They're just like, you do it, yes or no. Okay, I just need to make a record of this. Okay, and that's it.
And here's the thing. No, it's okay. Here's the thing with bishops. This may be the one time of year that they actually get some FaceTime with a family, because they're so busy doing everything else. So they may have 10 minutes, 15 minutes, depending on how your executive secretary is scheduling those tithing declaration interviews. They're going to have 15 minutes. I think they're more concerned with like you said, the welfare of the family, how they're doing. Like, in that tithing declaration, about 2 minutes is spent on, are you a tithe payer? Are you a full tithe payer? Right. The rest of the time, like you said, is checking in on the welfare of the family, because again, it's the one time of year that he may actually get to sit down and talk to a family, because he's so busy. Youth interviews, BYCs, WYCs, all these other meetings that he's involved with.
I remember when I got old enough to start doing the math, my bishop would say, this is how much you guys have paid to my parents when I was in high school. I remember judging my parents so hard, which is so bad of me. But the point, the point I want to make is my bishop never, ever was like, my whole life, the way he talked to my parents, I never felt like a bishop was talking down to my parents. Every bishop we had, it was me that actually kind of judged my parents incorrectly when I was 17 years old, being like, you guys make how much money? I grew up in a double wide trailer, but I didn't realize that wasn't by choice. I loved our double wide. I thought we were doing it for fun.
That you're like, okay, so if that's 10%, then oh no.
Reverse engineering it.
Oh yeah, after, hey mom, listen, I'll eat beans and rice any day of the week that you want. I'm so sorry. You don't have to buy me new shoes. But the point is, it wasn't a judgmental thing on the bishop's side, anyone's side. Some people just make tithing settlement to be something it's not. It's just not. It's just, hey, did you do this? Check. Okay, awesome. Can I help you? No? Yes? Awesome. Yeah. Let's rock and roll. Anyways.
Right. Yep. It's not like you're in the principal's office and you're in trouble and he's like, oh, do you know why I called you down here? And you're sweating the whole time. It's more just you're meeting with someone who's genuinely concerned about you. I would say the bishop's not even that concerned about your tithing. Even if you say, no, I'm not paying tithing, he might explore that further, or he might just say, you know what? How are you doing as a family? You guys have been through a lot lately. Let's see how we can help you out as a ward. It's not this method of pay to play in the church, because he framed it that. His framing was, you pay to get into heaven. That was basically what he said verbatim.
That's what he said.
You have to pay exactly what he said to the celestial kingdom, which the framing on that is a little disingenuous, right? Because he's making it seem like this is a corporate organization that is set up to make money, and that is the entire goal of it. And so I want you guys to keep that in mind as we keep watching this and as we keep talking about this, because that understanding and that assumption will help us as we show how Johnny is mischaracterizing the church and how these guys may be doing a little bit more than just trying to make money. So let's keep watching. Also, a real quick side note, I think this is the first time he actually called them a church. Every other part of the video, He referred to it as an organization or an institution. At the very end, he said this is a corporation. This is just this big corporation that tried to tell me who I was. How dare they? They made me so popular that I was prom king. So this is the first time he's saying this is a church. He didn't say that at the end. He didn't say this is a religion. He said this is a church. So he's framing this as like they're just technically a church. They're not actually a religion. This is a corporation hiding, disguised as a religion. They've got the little mustache glasses combo, and they're like, oh, I hope no one figures out that we're not actually a religion. Okay, so we'll keep watching. Sorry, I just had to make that point.
Something fairly unique.
There are a number of church leaders who are being drawn from the corporate world to kind of take their expertise. And so you get high-powered CEOs and others who were sort of drafted into church leadership to take it in this new direction.
One leader in particular.
Ooh, Jeff, big reaction there. What's on your mind?
I just like the drafted term, like it's some kind of NFL football team.
It's a fantasy football league.
It's a fantasy. I'll take your NL and Tanner, and you can give me. Like, were these guys already in leadership positions, and then the church saw their talents and said, "We're going to use them in their existing roles and use their talents." Like these guys, you don't just pull them off the street and go, "Hey, you're going to be in the quorum of 12 apostles now." Like that's not how it works. So
right.
A lot of these guys were already in existing church leadership capacities, and so they're just using the talents that they have. I have a hard time with them, and he says it a couple times. He's saying that later. He says that they draft them specifically for their temporal.
Yeah, he says
abilities.
that it's not spiritual. He says it's not
spiritual. And my argument to that is, he's like, none of these guys are theologically or spiritually sound. And I was like, have you met Jeffrey R. Holland? That guy's got a doctorate in philosophy. Have you met Neil A. Maxwell? Have you met Garrett W. Gong, who also has a master's in philosophy and a Rhodes Scholar? Like these guys they're well-rounded individuals. Like it's not just one aspect.
Tom Perry was a Marine.
I mean, these guys are not just business minds.
If the prophets and apostles were trying to be, oh, this person is theologically sound versus this person is a good businessman, we don't know. Like, I don't know. That part really bugged me. I don't know if it's going to come up. We haven't even watched it yet, but
those
it really
two things
bugged me.
they don't need to be mutually exclusive either. Like you could be both. Like,
yeah. Two things could be true at once. The thing that I think there's a prophet-sized hole in this argument, and they're looking, if this were the case, if this were true, and the church was just a business, as he's framing it, it would seem to make the most sense that they would put someone in as prophet who has a ton of business experience, who is themselves a business person, right? Who's all about growing the bottom line and driving revenue. But our prophet today, heart surgeon, right? Not necessarily known to be, deep in the world of business. And then before that, President Monson.
Yeah.
He wasn't necessarily a big business tycoon, and neither was President Hinckley. It's like all of these people, they didn't come from business backgrounds, big business backgrounds. I believe Thomas S. Monson was in publishing, and he worked in a publishing house, I believe. And he was young. He was young when they called him to be an apostle. I think he was in his mid-30s.
Yep.
And, he was a bishop at like 22.
Gordon B. Hinckley, yeah. I think Gordon B. Hinckley worked in communications, I want to say.
He did. He was the communications for the church.
So, I don't know. If you're going for driving, maximizing, because this is how a business person would think, is we need to make as much money as possible. It seems they would put their CEO as someone who's very business-minded, not someone who doesn't have a lot of business experience. They would never do that. Okay, so let's keep going here.
Business powerhouse from Canada. He was like an oil tycoon. super good at business, super loyal to the church. I actually grew up with Eldon Tanner's descendants. Like his great grandkids were like my closest friends as a kid. I heard a lot about this guy. He was a legend because he came in with all of his business skills and pointed them at the church and said, we are going to turn this into an efficient organization that makes money instead of just spends all the tithing we get. He cut costs, he creates all this financial discipline, and he starts to envision a church that invests that money into stocks and bonds and real estate. And they start doing this.
And he standardized church finances, said, okay, tithing's only going to go to this. And then we're going to take an amount of our profits from that. We're going to hire financial professionals in Wall Street, and they're going to control our trust fund to be able to grow. And we're only going to spend X percentage of our money a year so that we can always have the rainy day fund. So that slowly grows. And those funds, just due to the financial interest and compounded interest by the Reagan era of the 1980s and the neoliberalism of the 1990s, those investments explode and they make the church massively financially wealthy.
So this could be an entire video, the financial growth of the LDS.
So real quick, there are a lot of things that I want to point out, but one of the things that I just noticed, you see this graph over here where it says tithing income? I didn't notice that before, but you see
how tiny
the tithing income there? It's just this teeny tiny portion down there. So going back to this whole shame, they shame all their members, and it's all about the way that they make their money is by shaming their members into paying. That's the argument. It doesn't seem, if they were 100% business minded, that would be the play to make. If I were running a business like this and I saw compounding interest and things were getting so big, I would just continue to focus on what was doing really well. For tithing being such a small piece of that, I would say, yeah, forget about tithing. If this was not a religious institution, I think your average business person would look at something like tithing and seeing how much work goes into tithing declarations, and they would say, yeah, let's just cancel it because this isn't making us as much money as these other institutions. So if that's the assumption that I'm going to be making, then that the church isn't a church, it's just a corporate organization. They are either really ignorantly running it in a very poor way, not very efficiently, or perhaps they're not a corporate organization. Maybe there's something more, perhaps even a religion.
Right. This whole video.
Oh, sorry, Jeff. Go ahead, Jeff. I just thought something was very hilarious, but I'll jump in after you, Jeff.
I was just going to say this whole video misses the point of why we pay tithing in the first place. So, he doesn't even go into that. It's just this mysterious ooga booga. He never points out that it is a spiritual practice that goes back to the Old Testament. When I'm thinking of there were 3 different tithes in the Old Testament. There was the Levitical tithe that went to the Levite priest to support them. There was the festival tithe that went to support festivals and operations at the temple and stuff like that. And then there was a tithe to the poor and needy. And no, I'm not just pulling that out of nowhere. That's in Numbers and Deuteronomy. So this is a biblical practice. Now, modern day Christians would argue that Christ did away with that when there's no need for the temple, there's no need for tithing, but we believe that it is a biblical principle that God has commanded us to do. It isn't instituted by the church per se, it's instituted by God as a sign of faith on our part. And that's why we do it. And to your point of, that's why it's not run like a corporation, because it doesn't make sense if it was a corporation, right? To spend all that amount of time on it. Because we see it as a faith practice rather than a financial practice.
Well, that's 100% right. And it consumes about a quarter of a year for local leaders. If you've served in a bishopric, there is basically a quarter where they are just trying to get all of the tithing declaration done for every single member of their ward. And so they're trying to schedule appointments. I did find a pro tip. So this is a fun little pro tip for any bishoprics out there. the best way that I've seen that bishops have been able to get their tithing declaration done is by hosting big pancake breakfasts where you just have people filter in and filter out the entire breakfast. You're just like, all right, you come in, full tithe
That's
payer.
genius.
Yep, let's get to know you.
That's
Minister,
smart.
boom. Boom, boom, boom. Oh, it's been fantastic.
That's so
Because
smart.
I've been in bishoprics where the bishop is just scrambling. It's near the end of December. He's trying to get a hold of people. Everyone's out of town. Nobody's answering the phone. And so he's just saying, at that point, he has to make a decision whether or not they are full tithe payer because he has to get those reports sent to the stake on time. It is so laborious. It is so tedious. It is such a pain every single year. It just would not make sense if this was a corporate organization trying to do something like that. Okay. Love that point. Were you going to say something?
No, can we watch? Okay. Click play on the video again. I'll tell you when to click stop. Oh, wait, is this go back to right before we stopped? Right before he where is it at? Go back a little bit. Man, I can't. Maybe it's before this guy. He says something like, I can make a whole video.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, right there. Okay.
Standardized church finances said, okay, tithing's only.
I don't know where it was at, but he does say it's hilarious. He says, I can make a whole entire video about how the church grew so much money. Yeah, Johnny, that's what we signed up for here. Your video is titled How the Mormon Church Made $293 billion. We are
Way to bury the lead.
55.
Way to bury the lead.
We're 55 minutes into this video, and you finally acknowledged, we're in the meat. It's like, we're about to find out how the church did it. And he goes, I can make a whole video about this. Not gonna do that.
Boy, I tell you what, I could make an entire video about this, but instead I want to tell you about how bitter I am that I was so popular in high school because the church made me be popular.
Johnny,
Man.
That's why I clicked play on this video. I was genuinely I'm pumped to see. We should have been talking about E. Eldon Tanner freaking at minute 5. What are we doing right now? What's going on?
Come on, Johnny.
But there's no way he named the video before he made the video. It seemed like he rambled and then he goes, what's a good title for this video to catch people's attention? And then put how the church made that much money. And then forgot that he said, I can make a full video about this, but that's for another time. It's hilarious.
Yeah, it must have been someone on his staff. Someone must have been like, from an SEO perspective, this will get you more clicks. And he was like, all right, just do that. Just do that. This is my final swan song to my ex-Mormon video. So just title it whatever will get the most clicks. All right.
Go to this, and then we're going to take an amount of our profits from that. We're going to hire financial professionals in Wall Street, and they're going to control our trust fund to be able to grow. And we're only going to spend X percentage of our money a year so that we can always have the rainy day fund. So that slowly grows. And those funds, just due to the financial interest and compounded interest by the Reagan era of the 1980s and the neoliberalism of the 1990s, those investments explode and they make the church massively financially wealthy.
So this could be an entire video. The financial growth of the LDS Church from the 70s to today is a mind-blowing thing. I'll give you the highlights. The first highlight is look at this map. I have to say it at some point in the video, right? This is all of the agriculture and commercial and hospitality and industrial and special purpose and retail land that is owned by the Mormon Church. There's huge ranches and farms. But you know what else they're investing in? Me. People like me. I went to BYU, which by the time I went there was a good university. And 70% of my tuition was subsidized by the church. And this is an investment because we go to BYU, we graduate with these degrees from increasingly prestigious programs like the business or the accounting program. And by then we are in it. We've been through the whole pipeline, all the training, the mission, all of the standardized teaching over and over and over again. The same message. We're devoted. And we will be loyal tithe payers for the rest of our lives. Well, not all of us. Sorry. I was not a good investment for the church. But a lot of people graduate from BYU, go on to make a ton of money and give a lot of that to the church. The business school at BYU, by the way, is the Marriott School of Business. Yes.
All right. Well, hold on. Before we get too crazy into the Marriott Center, because he really pumps it up, there are a few pieces that I wanted to touch down on. So first of all, there is a piece where he says the church is investing in people. He's investing in me as a person because he went to BYU. So he's saying the church will make me more money, and then I will pay tithing on that, and that will help make the church more money. But let's go back to that graph. Do you remember that graph of how much money the church makes from tithing? So if we were to take this argument at face value, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. You're sitting down, you're like, oh man, Johnny, the church is they're getting you in the pipeline, and then they're getting you an education, they're making you all popular, they're opening doors for success, and it's all because of money. It's all because someone wants a fat payday. Ha ha ha! We got him now, Johnny. But look at him. Let's look at this for a second. Because I love spreadsheets, and because we started getting into spreadsheets last time, I decided while I was on the plane today flying to St. George that I needed to open up a new tab on my spreadsheet for this. So let me share my screen.
Oh, yeah.
And let's just take a peek and just see how much water this argument holds. So is the church's goal, if they were a corporate organization just trying to make money, well, and typically, I will say this, for those of you who don't really have a financial background, if you were to approach a hedge fund manager, let's just pitch this as an idea to a hedge fund manager, right? Like, hey, you got your stocks, you got bonds, you got that weird uncle who's into Bitcoin, but let me pitch you on another investment. Let's create an entire campus, staff it, subsidize an education, and then get as many people through that campus as we possibly can, expecting them to pay 10% of whatever they make after they leave that campus back to us. I imagine the hedge fund manager would ask a question like, well, sounds pretty good. I imagine we could get some high-paying careers out of that. We might be able to get a lot of fat stacks. And what kind of collateral are we going to have? And you probably say, well, nothing. How are we going to make sure that they pay us back for subsidizing all of that? Well, you can't, really. So you mean to tell me, like, I'm going to dump millions and maybe even billions of dollars in infrastructure and staffing, all of these educations, creating all these extracurriculars, all of these scholarships. I'm going to subsidize all of that education. And on top of that, you want me to do so without any kind of guarantee that I'm going to get that money back. If someone ever says either A, I'm leaving the church, or B, I don't want to pay tithing, but still want to come to church, we're just going to let that happen. That's just going to be okay. And it's like, no. So imagine trying to sell that to the hedge fund manager. I imagine the hedge fund manager might be scratching his chin a little bit thinking, it might be easier just to put that money into stocks. How about we just put it into stocks, huh? I hear GameStop is doing pretty well these days. Could we just pump it in there, huh?
Another thing that I've heard, this is like I've heard ex-members or anti-members or critical members, whatever they want to call themselves, say this before. They say, well, it's because the church is hoarding money. So you're going to the hedge fund manager and you're saying, whoa. This isn't so that you can have billions of dollars. It's so that in 50 years, the CEO or the owner of the hedge fund in 50 years can have billions of dollars. And then we're going to make that guy build a bunch of temples that are going to cost millions of dollars that don't make any income at all. That's what this is for. Makes no sense. Right. Bare minimum, the argument leads to this. Members of the church, if, let's say, the prophets are not divinely inspired, right? Like a lot of people believe, that means their sole purpose is that they simply want to have money for the future. They want future people to also be able to look at a lot of zeros. That is not, it could be so much worse. Like, let's say the church isn't true and the whole world crashes and burns right now. There's just $300 billion that are just going to disappear. No one's hurt. No one's hurt. No one, like, it's, you're okay. Like, it's not that deep of an argument. It doesn't make sense.
I'm really glad you're bringing that point up, because the entire video is just implication. He's never actually drawing anything back to an actual person. He's not making a claim outside of, this is a corporate organization. That's what he says. That was the actual claim. This is a corporate organization. But we're seeing so many instances here where a corporate organization would act entirely different than what we're seeing right now. So I am rejecting his hypothesis here. The other thing is, so he's implying that there is some smoking gun somewhere, but he fails to produce that smoking gun. We don't see it. We don't know where it is. It would be one thing if there was like a Kenneth Copeland-sized mansion,
he could
big old private jet with his face on it, and he's got the Rolexes. He's got a hangar with 20 jets. Totally. He could totally do that. He could make an entire video on that.
He's like, trust me, I can make a full video.
Yeah. So that money, we're talking billions and billions of dollars. And hashtag, let's make it $1 trillion. I saw that on my last video. Hashtag, I'm right there with you. Let's make it $1 trillion. Straight to the top, baby. Straight to the top. But the thing is, if there were leaders in the church that were benefiting in a large way, in a way that I think we would probably start to pick up on it. If the church was reporting that much money, and then we saw leaders that were getting into massive mega mansions, and that were starting to get sweetheart deals on private jets from Tyler Perry. At that point, we could say, all right, there's your smoking gun. Leaders are glutting themselves from the sacred tithing funds, or the money that the tithing is making. But there is a question that I wanted to ask. Is it evil for the church to put tithing funds into investments? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. I mean, I could make a whole video. About it, but I'm just going to say short answer, no, it's not evil.
And at the bottom of my tithing slip, it says, I'm giving this over to the church, and the church can do whatever it wants with it. So, not too worried about it.
Because, and it goes back to that biblical principle. Like, the law of tithing never mandated that whoever was giving their tithing would also follow that tithing wherever it went. It was, you give your tithing, and at that point, you have qualified for the blessings. Even if that person who you gave that tithing to spends it in an entirely inappropriate way, you will still get the blessings for paying tithing because you acted in accordance with the law of the tithe.
Absolutely.
And let's talk about that education piece, because he really hammered that in, where he was like, the church is investing in me. He wants my money forever. If you read the numbers, you can quickly get to the bottom of things. Let's start with total students. Total students, and this is all just AI estimated, because I wasn't able to, on my phone, find all the records and documents and stuff like that. You're going to see around 36,000 students attending at BYU. So one cohort, about 36,000 students, which means the cost per student is about $24,000. And that's per year. $24,000, you multiply that by 4 for the average 4-year degree, you're getting close to $100,000 per student. That's pretty expensive. The average salary that a student gets after graduating BYU annually. So that tithing would be about $6,000. So now, to pay back, for the church to break even, just to break even, just to hit zero on that $6,000 per year, because they invested about $100,000 into this person, it's going to take about 16 years until you just hit zero. Like, finally, we're square. Great. Do you know how many students are going to be active 16 years after they leave BYU? AI said anywhere from like 40 to 60% are still going to be active. So let's look at the cost. All right. So if I were a big business-minded guy running an organization, and I said, I'm investing in all of these students, I would want as many of those students to be back in my pipeline and back into my coffers as quickly as possible. And if I saw that there was a big segment of them that were leaving, I would say this is a failure. So let's look at how big of a loss we're seeing. So if you take 50%, we'll just say 50% for the sake of number, go inactive. Once they go inactive, they no longer pay tithing. So the church is losing out on that investment, right? So if that 36,000, so half of that would be 18,000 going inactive after like that 8-year mark. So before they break even. So in that 8-year mark, before they break even, they would be losing about $89,000 per student. And if you multiply that across all of those students, all of that 18,000, that's basically $1,608,000,000 that they have just lost on that cohort of students that they just spent so much money on. That is pretty sad. So by way of return, you're making a negative return at that point. You have just lost. So if this were a big business thing, you would have some splaining to do to your shareholders at that point. You would be just like Ricardo from I Love Lucy. Lucy, you got some splaining to do because you are losing a buttload of money on all these people because you don't have any collateral. There's nothing there because it's not a corporate organization.
Yep. Yeah, it's just not a tithing thing. That's what we're getting. Like the reason the church, he even said it right there. The reason the church has the money it has is not a tithing thing. It's an investment thing, right? And so this whole thing where the church is trying to scheme, you know how many members of the church there are? And we're going to be like, the church is trying to skim off 30,000 people that are members of the church to go to BYU, and that's where they're going to make most of their tithing. That's another thing. Like 30,000 people, there's like 17 million members in the world. So the church is doing terrible. Let's funnel everyone into this pipeline, and that's how we're going to make money, by making them rich, and then we're going to make money. They're only getting like, that's not even a percent that you could even look at. 30,000 out of 17 million is not a percentage. So this whole thing of that he's saying that the church is trying to get you into this pipeline where you go to BYU and then come out and you make a ton of money for the church. It's like, that just not, first off, that's your experience, Johnny. That is your experience. You grew up in Utah, or not in Utah. Where did he grow up in? I think he grew up in Utah, right?
Oregon.
He grew up in Oregon.
Yeah, it was.
You lived in Oregon. This is probably what happened. He lived in Oregon. He moved to Utah, and he was in Provo, and he goes, oh my gosh, everyone here is so rich. Probably hung out in Draper a lot or something like that. And he goes, where'd you guys all go to school? And they were like, oh, BYU. And then he's like, this is how the church makes money. He jumped to a crazy conclusion. That's just not my experience, or anyone in Guatemala that I served. It's not their experience. If Kat was here, he would say 100%. Anyone in his mission in the Caribbean, that's not what they experience. Like, it's not acting like the church is trying to get us to go to BYU so it can make money off of our tithing. It's just an insane claim. It doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even make sense.
Well, that doesn't even account for the amount of money that goes into BYU Pathway in third world countries where you're not necessarily going to receive that same amount of return on your investment, right? Because they're subsidizing wholeheartedly all of that in Africa, in some of these other countries and continents, right?
And it doesn't even include the segment of students at Provo that are not members. Because there are non-member students that go to Provo. That would be a terrible business decision. We're going to spend $100,000 investing in this person that will never pay us tithing ever. Now, they're not going to subsidize it as much, but there are still going to be opportunities for scholarships. There's still going to be opportunities for grants, scholarships. There's going to be cheaper housing, being in a college town and stuff like that. So it's not going to be 100% the same, but still, it's not going to be as good as potentially raising up someone that will give you a return if you were a business.
Yeah, I think this shows that the church is about investing in people. And actually, if one of his charts later, he shows how much the church spends on stuff. And look, I'm not a mathematician, I'm a science guy, but I did the quick math and it was like 6.2 billion between humanitarian, member aid, education, and operations of church facilities. That is to benefit members and community members. And then, he goes on to say something like, they just don't spend that much money on humanitarian aid or aiding people or whatever it is. And I'm like, dude, 6.2 billion is a huge number to try to fathom. Sure,
It's massive.
in relation to the investments, it looks huge on the graph, but that's a massive amount of money reinvesting in people, because the church is about investing in people and making people better.
Yeah. Communities better, families better. It's about people.
It's about teaching
It's
a
almost
man
like-
how to fish.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So let's keep going.
Building that is named after and Elvin Tanner. These are the business titans that established the church not just as like a corporate entity in its hierarchy and its look, but also in its finances and its investment strategies, in its corporate structure, in its legal, and it's like they got so sophisticated. And look what happens. It pays off.
Even today, many of the senior church leadership, if not at the 12, at the level of the 70, are drawn from the ranks of very high-powered lawyers and corporate types who can manage the church's vast resources efficiently. They're often not chosen for their theological or doctrinal understanding, or even their great public speaking skills. They're often chosen because they happen to be really good at their jobs of kind of managing large organizations.
Like in the last decade, it's estimated that their wealth has grown $100 billion. $100 billion. And over $200 billion of that is just pure hard cash that is in like stocks and bonds.
Okay, just a side note, that's not
Hard
called
cash? Hard cash
That's not
is
how that
not
works.
stocks and
Those
bonds.
are called investments. That's just investments.
Pure
Yeah.
hard cash. What?
Like that matters. That matters when you're talking finances. It's very important to differentiate between cash, which is incredibly liquid and subject to inflation and will be decreasing in value every year, especially if you're holding on to it, versus an investment that is going to give you a return every single year, and that
Well, could
is
you-
going to have performance that you're tracking and analyzing. It's
Could you
very different than
imagine-
just having a big Scrooge McDuck vault that the church leaders are just diving into and hosting little pool parties with the upper elites,
Well, could you imagine going to, this is what I'm saying with what you're saying, Hayden, if you went to an investor or whatever, like somebody, and you were like, listen, I'm going to give you $200 billion in pure hard cash. And they're like, wow, okay, that's great. He's like, here's all these stocks and bonds. That's what you mean. That's a different thing. We're talking about different things. This is not the same. I mean, one of them's, I would prefer having stocks and bonds, but why are we calling it hard cash? That's crazy.
Right. Well, especially when you're doing an episode about the church's finances, right? That's when it starts to matter, especially if you are reporting, and from an official reporting standpoint, an investigative journalist going in and getting the scoop. You got to get these things right.
Walmart doesn't have that much money on hand. And they are considered the richest religious organization in the world, if you didn't count like the Catholic Church, which isn't one organization. The church.
Did you catch that? Did you catch that little part where he's they are the largest if you don't really count the Catholics. Just get the Catholics out of there. These guys are the largest. All right, well, I don't know how I feel about that, but the Wikipedia page told them we're the largest, so we got to go with it.
Church is kind of more centralized. And so on this Wikipedia article, that's why they put them at the top. Anyway, they're incredibly rich for being such a small church. How do they spend their money? Well, we have some decent data on this. Right here at the top, they spend some of their money on humanitarian aid, doing projects around the world.
Pay attention
they
to
spend
this.
even more
Yep.
on aid that they give to their members, like for members in need, food assistance, things like that. Then they spend about $1 billion on church education. So much of what we talked about in this video is this budget. It is the curriculum. It is the teaching. It is BYU. It's a good investment. This is the stuff that informed my worldview. And then there's this big chunk that is just operating the church. The buildings, there are some paid people, they have to pay them. But look at this. The vast majority of the money they spend is on reinvesting to grow their vast wealth. That's like 65% of all of their expenditures is just reinvesting. I did not know this growing up, and I don't think many did. I don't know, I thought my money was like going to grow the church, build temples, and, humanitarian stuff. I was just like, like, aren't they doing humanitarian projects? They are, but it's just not that much. And listen, that's actually really rational. The church never said that their mission was to be humanitarian. Their mission is to fulfill the mandate given to Joseph Smith, which is to prepare the world for the second coming of Jesus Christ by...
Okay, did you catch that quick contradiction that he made? He said
Yes.
The church never said it was about being humanitarian. It was about preparing the world for the second coming of the Savior, which if you just get that horse all the way out of the stalls, you realize it's actually preparing people to become ready to withstand the Savior's presence, ready to have a relationship with him where he can live among them in peace, which is going to, by definition, be humanitarian because it involves helping humans become better. Maybe I missed something on that.
Another thing that he said that I didn't. Okay, sorry. I was listening to this just in my pocket. I wasn't watching the video, and I heard him say it invests in humanitarian and invest in the other one. And then he said, and then $1 billion in education. In my headphones, I was like, why didn't he say how much humanitarian? Well, like he didn't say a number for those ones. He just said the education number, which I thought it was funny, but he shows it. So I was like, why didn't he say anything? I wasn't watching. That's my fault. But the other thing I want to say is he goes, I thought my tithing was invested in growing the church, but it's not. It's actually going to investments. Investments grow the church. So I don't know. Why do you have this weird roundabout way of looking at it? If the church is making $23 billion of putting it all in investments or whatever it may be, like, that's still growing the church, right? Like, how is that not growing the church? Would you say the church is shrinking financially? No, it is growing. It's growing the church.
As a tithe payer, would you... Oh, yeah.
I was just going to say,
ahead,
like, if I were discussing this with my 13-year-old or 15-year-old daughters, and let's sit down and talk about Ensign Peak Advisors and their investments in the church, you know what I would get? Like, rolled eyes, don't want to talk about it. So I'm not talking about the church's investment strategies with my teenagers. No. But
so did you just say you were hiding them intentionally from
actively
teenagers?
Hiding it.
You're hiding it. Yeah.
One of these days, they're going to go, my dad never told me about Ensign Peak Advisors.
He hid it from me. Yeah. No, I agree. And as a tithe payer, the church is hyper concerned about being careful and conscientious with how they spend tithing money. And so as a tithe payer, when I see them getting dividends from their investments and then reinvesting those dividends and using my tithing to make more investments and get more dividends and make more investments happen, I'm happy about that because it means that my tithing is able to help exponentially more people than just using it to buy a loaf of bread for someone that will feed them for one day. It's like, no, my tithing that's now being compounded and returning an interest annually will now be able to give that person a loaf of bread every single day of every single year that they need it. And that is really powerful. And so we are almost done with this segment. So we'll finish watching it and then we'll give some final
spreading
thoughts.
the good news of the restoration and giving people the opportunity, dead and alive, to get baptized and do all the rituals. That is their mission. And they believe that they need a giant rainy day fund to do that. And I don't totally know why, like what their plan is. But boy,
Seems like Johnny didn't really pay attention in Sunday school again. So we have the 10th article of faith. Do you remember that one? So 10th article of faith, we believe in the literal gathering of Israel, in the restoration of the lost tribes, that Zion, the New Jerusalem, will be established upon the American continent, which that's going to take a lot of money to do. Just the that to establish Zion, the New Jerusalem upon the American continent, that's going to take a ton of resources. And that's forward facing. This is the one of the articles of faith that is forward facing. I don't blame him because this is one of those things second coming is something that you actually have to study on your own. It's not going to be something that it's going to be right there next to the claims, all the other claims that he made about church history that were hidden from him, like polygamy and stuff like that. The second coming is right there too. So he probably didn't know about that one. And that's why he's sitting there befuddled. Why do they have such a big rainy day fund? They are looking towards the future. And they're saying, we have to actually prepare the world for the second coming. That's going to take a buttload of money to do that.
They've got a lot of money. Now, a few years ago, one of the employees of the investment firm for the church was like uncomfortable with this. He's like a member of the church, believer. And he like comes out and he's like, this is weird that the church has so much money. Specifically, he alleged that there was like $100 billion that was supposed to go to some charitable thing and it wasn't. That ended up not really going anywhere. There wasn't any like fallout there, but it did draw attention to all of this. And the SEC did end up fining the church, discovering that they were using a bunch of shell companies all around the country to hide how much money they had because they didn't want anyone to know that they were sitting on so much cash. And they paid a fine. And since 2019,
not cash,
they have been complying with the right way to file their taxes and pay taxes on the stuff that they have to. So what do the members of the church think about their tithing being used to run a hedge fund? And the answer is we'll never know because there isn't a culture of debate and dissent. But I can tell you by proxy is if I were a member of the church.
All right. Well, fortunately for Johnny Boy, we've got some members of the church on the call today. So what are your thoughts? You see the church's enormous financial reserves. What do you say to that?
If you want to know how to handle your money correctly, look at the church and you will see how to handle your money correctly.
Absolutely. Jeff, what about you? You see this big, huge reserve. What are your thoughts?
I think that it is something that is setting the example for how we should live our lives in a financially solvent, financially stable way. And I'm grateful for the church's investment in me and my family, and I hope that it continues on. That's what I hope for.
It just feels like a nothing burger. I mean, I want to say so much, but I've already said so much. But it just feels like when people leave the church, for some reason, they become very bitter about this, or at least vocal about it. And it's just like, it's just not that deep for me. It's 10%. It's 10%. And if the church is super rich because of it, that's great. Maybe I would be a little more frustrated if like every 70 and every apostle and prophet was living in like huge mansions in freaking
100%.
Beverly Hills and they were driving
100%.
Ferraris and they were driving like, what would make me even more scared is if the leak happened and then we found out the church didn't have any money. I'd be like, yo, what are you doing with all the money that I'm giving you my whole life? No, instead the leak happened and we go, oh, the church has been great. Church has been chilling. I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome. Just like he says, I would say.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, I totally agree. I'm right there with you. I'm saying hashtag, let's make it a trillion. Let's make it a trillion, baby. Let's keep growing. The stock market is the greatest wealth building tool in the entire world. If I was a member looking at the church and seeing them barely making ends meet, getting by with tithing, and knowing that they had a mission to establish Zion, the New Jerusalem, upon the American continent, and they were not using the greatest wealth building tool known in modern history, I would be scratching my head and thinking like, wait a second, how are we going to do this, guys? But I look at that and I think, man, I think these guys know what they're doing, and it makes me actually pretty happy and pretty enthused as a tithe payer. That was pretty much the entirety of his video. So final thoughts before we wrap up. Let's start with Roy and then Jeff, and then we'll close out from there.
Keep paying your tithing, fellas. Keep paying your tithing. And this is he didn't really touch on this because a lot of people try to be like, oh, poor families can't pay tithing. Like my parents, like I've said multiple times, I grew up in a double wide trailer in a very low income family. My parents always said, If you can't live the way you're living on 90% of your income, then you are living outside of your means. So dial it back, live within your means. And I take that hook, line, and sinker, especially now I'm married and I have a little baby boy. If I can't live my life on 90% of my income, then I need to figure out how to either make a little bit more money or dial back a lot of my expenses. And I think it's a great way to measure how you're doing financially is if you can pay your tithing, you're like, okay, I'm living within my means instead of letting my means run me out of my house.
Great point. Jeff, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, just two things. I'm going to make a plug for, he kind of slid the SEC violation in there at the last minute. There's a fantastic article from Fair Latter-day Saints, just church financial reporting to the SEC. If you're a nerd and you want to learn about the intricacies of tax law, shell corporations, what was happening prior to 2000 and after, fantastic article about that. You can really get a better understanding of what that was and what that meant. And then I just want to echo Roy's sentiment about tithing. Like, sure, it's a temporal law, but it has blessed my family spiritually and in so many aspects. And I can't even begin to kind of rehearse all of them. And honestly, I think I said this in the other, I don't care what the church does with my money. It doesn't really matter to me. I'd be more concerned if they were taking that money and wasting it and they weren't using it like the parable of the talents and expanding on it. Then I would have a problem with it. But what they're doing in terms of how they're reinvesting that into people, I don't have a problem with that.
Well, it's 100% parable of the talents. So everything that I'm seeing so far, all of the claims that he made, if I were a business owner, which I am a business owner, if I were this massive corporation owner and I was seeing the amount of money that the church is losing by doing the things that it's doing, I would say this is a shoddily run organization. I would say instead of just like trash the campus, trash everything else, it's way easier to get an investment, a return, just by investing in the stock market. So I would say just keep doing that. Just keep investing in real estate and the stock market, shut down BYU Pathway, shut down the campus, shut down the churches, shut down even tithing, because it's a sliver of the total return there. So it just would not make sense from a business perspective. So for someone that is more investigative, journalistic minded, like Johnny, it's a little disappointing that there's no through line through all of these arguments. There's no through line. There's nothing connecting them. It's all just like, hey, did you notice this? And did you notice this? And I think there's something here. And this seems a little interesting. He never put all of that into one sandwich because there's nothing. There is no sandwich. There's nothing there. Similar to his claims about being oppressed and harmed by being too popular at home. We're seeing the same amount of substance here, and that's disappointing to me. So it's really encouraging for members of the church. If you did think that Johnny did have a point, then you will be disappointed because he didn't. And you can rejoice knowing that the brethren, they know what they're doing at the end of the day. And to kind of resonate with what Roy said, I would 100% rather have 90% of my income plus the Lord's help versus 100% doing everything on my own. And with that final thought, I think we'll wrap up. So we got Roy from the Iron Rodcast. Be sure to check him out and subscribe. We got Jeff Borders, the author of the Antichrist Playbook. And I'm Hayden Holm, and this is Salty Saints. We'll see ya.